Hi, I'd like to welcome you to worship today. My name is Ryan McCord and I'm a ministry student at Howard Payne. And I would like to invite you in today. One of my favorite things about our church is that we do a great job of loving people as they are. Never once have I felt like I have to put myself together and be the best version of myself to come to church, whether I am sad or struggling or hurting. I come as I am, and we do a great job of accepting everyone, loving them exactly where you are. And so I'd like to invite you into that today, no matter where you find yourself physically, emotionally, and mentally. We would like to welcome you in and let you know that we are happy to have you here as you are. We are going to be reading from Esther today. The king loved Esther more than all the other women, and she obtained grace and favor in his sight more than all the other virgins. So he set a royal crown upon her head and made her queen instead of Vashti. Then the king made a great feast, the feast of Esther, for all of his officials and servants. And he proclaimed the holiday in the provinces and gave gifts according to the generosity of a king. And Mordecai told them to answer to Esther, "Do not think in your heart that you will escape in the king's palace any more than any of the other Jews. For if you remain silent at this time, relief and deliverance will arise for the Jews from another place, but from your father's house you will perish. Yet who knows whether you have come to the kingdom for such a time as this?" Then Esther told them to reply to Mordecai, "Go gather all the Jews who are present in Susa and fast for me. Neither eat nor drink for 3 days or nights. My maids and I will fast likewise. And so I will go to the king, which is against the law. And if I perish, I perish."
Well, good morning, church family. Thank you for being a part of this. I want to thank Ryan for being with us today to take a moment to invite us into the worship space. Before we get going with the message today, Pastor Jay and I both wanted to point your attention to a letter that we worked on together this week that's been sent out. It's on our Facebook page. It's being mailed to others. It's on our church's website. If you'll go there and click, we encourage everyone to take a moment to read it. I do want to highlight a couple of things. First of all, I want to mention that the leadership team, in meeting the last couple of weeks and considering all the factors, feel that it's very important that we have increased measures of safety protocol when we come together for worship due to the high number of cases in our area. So here are a few highlights of things that will change a little bit. The building will not be open until 10 a.m. So just know that the church outside doors, the two entrances, the one to common ground, the one to sanctuary will be the two that will open, but they won't open until 10 a.m. During this initial phase of reopening, we encourage family worship. That we will not have nursery, we will not have children or youth ministries until we feel that it's safe to do so. Please wear a mask when entering the building. If you do not have a mask, one will be provided for you at either of the entrances when you come into the building. Please sit as a family household unit. We ask that you not mix families for obvious reasons, so please make sure that you're sitting together only with members of your household. After worship, out of respect for others, we ask that you move out of the worship space, and if you want to visit in groups and talk to one another, which we encourage you to do so, of course, but we ask that you would do that outside. We will continue to offer an online worship experience, so for those of you that continue to need to stay at home, just rest assured there will be plenty of worship opportunities and teaching opportunities of videos coming to you each week, and you can find those always on our church Facebook page, FMC Facebook page, our church YouTube channel, or on our website. So we know that we rejoice together as we come back to worship in person. We just know that it's going to look a little bit different for a while, but we know that that is not going to dampen what we need to do to gather as God's people to worship and be together. So we're glad we're able to do that. We hope that we can continue to be a blessing, not just to each other, but to our community. And so we encourage you to go online and take a look at the letter that has been posted there so that you're fully aware of all the protocol that will be in place. So thank you for being a part of this one. And now we turn our attention to today's message in our series on Reset.
When I got a chance to hit the reset button, I took it. And each time I came out stronger and more fulfilled.
You need to hit the reset button, reset your life and say, you know what? I have this huge gift of another day.
Ken Burns is an amazing documentary filmmaker. His works range from the Civil War all the way to country music. And I've admired his work for a long time. I think he brings the subject to life in a way that no one else really does. My favorite documentary series that he ever did was called The War. It was It chronicled the life of 4 American towns and the effect of World War II on both the people staying at home and on those who went to war. And in this documentary, he interviewed any number of people that experienced the war in those different ways. There was a particular segment that I found interesting, and it was the segment on D-Day, June 6, 1944, and all the different beachheads, but the one that was the most difficult beachhead in which we lost the largest amount of our soldiers was Omaha Beach. And I remember listening to one of the men who was there and was on one of those transports that was going into the beachhead, and what he described was that nothing that they had planned for was the way it was supposed to be. Of the 29 amphibious tanks that were loaded up and were supposed to land on Omaha Beach, only 2 of them even made it to the beach. Many of those devices where the transports had hit sandbars far away from the shore, and they had to step out and walk through the water and swim and all these things. Bombing attacks had come the night before for American bombers and early that morning, and they were supposed to make craters on the beach because it was such a long way across the beach up to the next part of the terrain, and they did not accomplish their mission. There was no place for men to hide. Thousands of men died on Omaha Beach because of that. But the saving grace of the story is what I want to focus on today. It is a reset that was made by the men who were there at that battle when they realized that the craters weren't there, that they were far away from the beach, that really in essence nothing of what that was planned was working out the way it was supposed to. They took a moment and reevaluated, and they hit the reset button, and they began to improvise. This is well documented in the scene in Saving Private Ryan when they're on Omaha Beach. And these men began to improvise and go by instinct and do some things. And they saved a mission that in the middle of this mission, General Omar Bradley, because it was so bad, even considered abandoning the taking of Omaha Beach that day. But history records that because of a reset that was made by the men, the brave men, who did what they had to do to salvage the mission, history tells us that that beachhead was taken, and it was a big part of us turning the tide on the Nazis in the history of World War II. Without a reset, that would not have been possible. The story of Esther is also a story in which people's lives are at stake, and also a story in which the key characters had to step back for a moment and reevaluate what was happening and hit the reset button. It is, I think, one of the great stories in all of the Bible. The picture of God saving His people in the midst of tremendous adversity, the incredible boldness of Mordecai, the unflinching courage of young Esther to execute a plan. The way that they handled the situation, I think, for us, are to be signs that help mark the way for the road ahead for us in our own journeys. They are road signs. They are guides. They are things that are there to advise us, to instruct us. And I want to lift out of this story the example of the reset for Mordecai and Esther and bring it to life as best we can today to help us in our own times of reset. So today we look at this story for the particular purpose of looking at it through the lens of the topic that we've been dealing with the last couple of weeks. Esther was a person who was clearly familiar with the reset button. Life had imposed on her more than her fair share of resets. She was orphaned as a young child. Her people were captured and taken to a foreign land. Then she was chosen, and I'm sure not giving any choice, but put in the house of the king for a year, and then to be considered to be queen. And then she was chosen as queen. I mean, you talk about some resets. Those are some intense, serious, all-encompassing resets. And perhaps now, just as she is beginning to settle into her new position as queen and get comfortable with what's going on, she is thrust into the precarious role of having to stand between the king and God's people, the Jewish people. Her story gives to us, I think, some of the great quotes in all of the Bible. If I perish, I perish. And who knows but that you've come to the kingdom for such a time as this. Great quotes. So Esther is familiar very clearly in this scripture, what we know of her, with those times when life demands for us that we make wholesale changes. She is not resetting in this story because she's bored or because things have been a little bit stressful at work and she wants to take a vacation to clear her head. She is resetting because the circumstances of her life have demanded of her that changes and adjustments be made. And I don't know who I'm talking to today, but I think that as I've prepared for this, my sense is that there are people among us who need to watch this and listen and pray before the Lord, because you are in a similar situation. You're not resetting because it's a little bit stressful at work. You're resetting because life has come crashing down on you, and you're having to hit the reset button in ways that you're not even comfortable doing. But here you are. Life is demanding this. You're feeling trapped and overwhelmed and frustrated and exhausted. And I come with a message today that was the same and that is clear in the story of Esther, that even in the midst of our greatest adjustments and resets and trials, that God is with you. He will not abandon you. Just as He was with Esther, He will be with you. God is in the business of providing for us heavenly resources in our natural circumstances. So I want to point out a couple of resets in this story today in order to help each of us with where we are in our own lives. The first reset is Mordecai's admonition. You may remember Mordecai was a relative. I think he's a cousin. When her parents die, he basically adopts Esther and takes care of her. And so he knows her the best. And so after she's been in the palace a while and now she's becoming queen, when he finds out about this plan for all of the Jews to be annihilated, for genocide to take place in Persia of all the Jewish people that were there in exile, Mordecai sends this admonition to the palace to Esther. Do not think in your heart that you will escape in the king's palace any more than all of the other Jews. I like how it reads in the New Living Translation. Do not think for a moment that because you're in the palace, you will escape when all of the other Jews are killed. Now, we have no indication in the story that Esther had slipped into some sort of mindset that would warrant such a strong admonition or correction, kind of a rebuke, if you will. But Mordecai seemed that he felt it was necessary to make sure he reset her mentality, her approach to this particular situation. And he knew her well. Maybe he knew that because she was young, and because she was receiving special treatment, because she was living in now these luxurious surroundings, that it would be just human nature for her to just sort of drift off and just think about herself. Maybe he knew that the pleasures of the palace might cause her to get all too comfortable. And so he sends this admonition to us. I think the question for us today is, who is the Mordecai in our life? Who's that friend? Who's that relative that will say to you, hey, listen, don't you go to thinking just because that situation is this way for you that you should do thus and so. We need Mordecais in our lives, people that jerk us back to reality, that snap us back to seeing it the way that it needs to be seen. And so it's a stern reminder for all of us, I think, in this sense, that our affluence, our success, our comfort, our opportunity to live at ease can be what allures us away from living out our purpose and helping others when we should. It lulls us to sleep because we're comfortable and at ease, and we just start taking care of ourselves, and we're not thinking about what we can do to act on behalf of others. So, my question for you today is this: where are you comfortable in your life? What part of your life where you're at ease? You got plenty of money, but nobody else does. Your work schedule's perfect, but your neighbor's isn't. Where in your life is it because things are so good for you that you maybe in some way are forgetting others? This is not any attempt to make any of us feel guilty. This is just a reminder that it's human nature to drift into that sort of little bit of what I would call a spiritual coma, and not be acting on the opportunities that we have to take care of others because we are so blessed. Reset number 2 is this: she connected her circumstances to her purpose. I don't know that she saw it at first. I think Mordecai wanted to make sure that she was seeing it. And she connected her circumstances to her purpose. And he says to her, I know you're beautiful. I know you have a nice figure, both of which are recorded in the Bible. But Esther, don't you see that it's because of these things that you've come to the kingdom for such a time as this? You're not there just to be there. You're there because there is divine purpose in being there. And I don't know why we ever do that, but we tend sometimes to disconnect our natural circumstances from our spiritual realities. See, we need to remember that what we see in the natural is always a reflection of what's going on in the spiritual. I love this quote from Mark Twain: the 2 most important days in your life are the day you were born and the day you find out why. We need to always be connecting what's going on in our natural life to what's going on in our spiritual life. So what about you? Perhaps you're under pressure now in ways that you haven't been for a while. What's going on in your life that is hard right now? What is it that's hard? Maybe you're not even talking to some of your friends about it. Maybe at night you're wondering about it, losing a little sleep. And in the midst of that, who is your Mordecai? What is the person that has the voice that would say to you, perhaps this situation is hard, but it serves a greater purpose. Perhaps this situation is for you what it was for Esther, that you've come to this place in your life for some sort of divine, spiritual kingdom purpose. I want to remind you today that God does not waste our struggles. He maximizes them. And so in conclusion, what would we say today? Esther's reset caused her to get her mind right, and once she got her mind right, she instantly then began to swing into action. She had a clear plan and she executed it. Reset leads to action. How do you know that you've hit the reset button and you've really done it? It leads to some kind of new action. Reset leads to action. And I love this about Esther, that once she decided and once she heeded what Mordecai was saying, she sent word back, tell everybody to fast for me, to pray for me. I'm going to do it. I'll go into the king. Even though it may cost me my life. If I perish, I perish. I'm going to go in. Her action was clear because her reset had done exactly what it would do. Esther didn't blink. I like people that don't blink when it's time to take care of something. So an appropriate reset always leads to action. So who knows today, as we end this, that I would say to you that some of you have come to your particular situation, your own crossroads for such a time as this. And if you can hit the reset, if you can listen to the wise counsel of those around you who would speak like Mordecai spoke to Esther, that it may be hard right now, but perhaps for you, you would come to understand that there's purpose in the pain and that there's this discomfort and this situation, that it's different than what you would want it to be, that in it God is speaking and God is trying to accomplish something that He couldn't accomplish if everything was just comfortable and easy for you. So if you were to really hit the reset button, you might just find yourself in a similar position to Queen Esther. And maybe, just maybe, you'll surprise yourself and you'll emerge from that with a clear sense of what the action is that needs to be done. I hope that you'll consider in this season taking some time to hit your own personal reset button. And so remember, who knows, but that you've come to the kingdom, that you've come to this season in your life, you've come to this crossroads, you've come to this place that's uncomfortable and that is painful and sometimes controversial for you. It causes you conflict, but you've come here, and in it you got to see that what's going on in the natural has some connection to your spiritual purpose. So who knows? Maybe you've come to the kingdom for such a time as this. So remember, next Sunday, if you can, be here in person. We will rejoice to be back together, and we will be expecting for God to meet with us. Or if you're still staying at home online, I hope that when you log in and you listen to the messages and the worship services online, that you come to that experience expecting to know God's presence and God's power in it, because we are praying for you, and we know that although we are apart physically, we are not apart spiritually, and our church will emerge from this stronger than ever before. Better days are ahead for FUMC Brownwood, and I look forward to that. So I say to you today in this closing, the Lord be with you and the Lord keep you. We'll see you next week.